So Mitchell, thanks so much for joining me at the table and for supporting the DLA Piper Real Estate Summit. Really happy to have you here today. Given your background on both the brick and mortar side of the world and the venture capital side of the world, how does what you have done in the real world affect how you look at property and technology?
So it's really an interesting time, and we were having a discussion here today about the uses of space and how they're changing and how everything is so dynamic, how things are need to be so flexible. So when you think of the intersection between property and technology, property takes a long time to develop, adapt, or reuse. And the question is, for people who are in that business, how do they plan for the future? And the question is, if you plan for the future, you better make your space adaptable, you better make it flexible, you better make it in a way that can accommodate future needs and uses.
So it's not even just a question of how does the technology interact with the space, it's how does the fact of the technology change the space and how developers and operators think about the space?
Yes, so if you're in the brick and mortar side, you need to think about how you're going to plan your physical structures for the future. If you're on the technology side, in a lot of ways you have the easier assignment because you're bringing the new latest thing to the world of property, and you are the agent of change. So there's lots of great companies emerging with lots of great ideas, and they're working with the built environment so that 1 + 1 equals something more than 2. The folks who are on the property side have a little bit more of a challenge because they're long on real estate. They need to be nimble and flexible, and they need to learn how to adopt these technologies as well.
So that kind of leads to two questions. The first is, how adaptable and how open are the brick and mortar folks to these changes?
That's a great question, and I think that the folks in the built environment have become much more focused, much more interested in change in the future, either because they're being offensive and they want to take advantage of what's happening, or they're being defensive because they want to, ensure the future of their asset for generations to come.
Then on the technology side, there's always this tension between being a technology expert and a subject matter expert.
Right.
And so you've got a lot of great technology ideas that actually don't work because the people don't have a connection to how real estate actually works. How do you identify technology folks who do understand how the property side works?
So I think what we're now beginning to see for the first time ever, really technologists and real estate folks at the table together collaborating. We're seeing really a new kind of paradigm where people are working together to figure out the future with one another, so that you just don't have a technologist geek who's buried deep down in some software engineering development and some property person who's not connected. You really get a great opportunity to collaborate together.
Got it. One last question. You talked about building in the flexibility on the brick and mortar side. What does that look like? What operationally, what does it mean to develop a building or redevelop a building where there is built-in flexibility for future utilization?
So if you almost think of the space as becoming an envelope or a box, you want that box to be as simple, as nimble, as flexible as possible to accommodate as many uses, and not to have very complicated, technical, very specific kinds of things built into it. You want it to be able to be, call it a black box.
Got it. All right, lastly, you threatened to ask me a question. Do you happen to have a question? You don't need to ask me one.
So from the conversations that you are having today, what's percolating with you? What are you finding to be really interesting, relevant, and thoughtful for you?
So, great question. Couple things. People are focused on demographics and how demographic trends are helping to identify what makes sense to invest in and what doesn't make sense to invest in. Second, a lot of discussion on technology with a particular focus on data. Had a couple people mention how important data is and how it's helping them think about the investments that they are making, the investment decisions that they're making. What are they seeing 2 to 3 years out, and getting more data. It's really a question of, hey, I have an idea, I may have an algorithm, I may have some AI, but I really need data to feed that.
So here are our takeaways. If you go back to The Graduate, it was plastics. Circa 2019, it's now data.
Yes.
Or it was location, location, location. Now it's data, data, data.